DuPont, which is a criminal chemical contamination polluting machine, DuPont, had spun off into a subsidiary company called Chemours. And DuPont/Chemours had a factory in Fayetteville for many, many years in North Carolina. And in that factory, they manufactured Teflon, obviously, you know, the non-stick cookware, in addition to other products like Teflon. And during that manufacturing of Teflon, they used certain chemicals to make Teflon. One of those chemicals is called Gen X. Not Gen X like the cool kids. It's just called Gen X. Now, and tell me, you know, in the live chat if you need me to re-explain anything, because it is complicated. And Gulamer La Scooter, I just moved to North Carolina, so I'm eager to hear this Cape Fear River news. I'm here to report it. So, Gen X is a very, very dangerous chemical. It's very similar to something called C8. C8 is a PFOA. They're finding PFOAs in water all over the country, including already contaminated Michigan. And PFOAs are, I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's called porphyrinactic acids. And they cause cancer, they cause autoimmune issues, reproductive issues for women, a whole lot of other things. So basically, during the manufacturing of Teflon in this factory in Fayetteville for decades, we're talking about dating back to the 1980s. During the manufacturing of that, they were dumping this waste byproduct into the Cape Fear River. The Cape Fear River serves drinking water to, when I was there 2 years ago, about 500,000 people. So you're talking about the drinking water of 500,000 people. 500,000 people. So Flint, for example, when the water was switched, that was 100,000 people. You're talking 500,000 people in this region in North Carolina. Again, Fayetteville is here, Wilmington is down here. So they found out about this only last year. They found out about this last year because, like in other situations, the chemical companies knew about this common contamination for many, many years. But they don't willingly report, hey, we're dumping these very, very dangerous chemicals into the drinking water. Hey, by the way, it's not only going into the drinking water, it's going into the air, it's going into the ground soil. And, you know, people are going to get cancer and autoimmune issues and all this stuff. So I went down there while I was still at the Young Turks last year. I went to, a community meeting, a press conference. I interviewed activists on the ground. And it was a very serious situation, and people were very, very worried because, you know, people have health problems, and they might not, and now they have to wonder, well, did it come from the drinking water? If you're a parent, have I been giving my kids contaminated drinking water? It's a very serious thing. So this came out, I believe, last summer, 2017, last summer. So what happens? DuPont has been dumping these cancer-causing contaminants in the Cape Fear River since 1980. Think about 1980. I think MTV was 1981. ESPN was 1979. Like, we're talking a long time ago. And now, just now, there is something called a consent order being snuck in the dusk of night, where DuPont, for contaminating the water in North Carolina for 40 years, guess how much they're going to have to pay? Before I show you the story, guess how much DuPont is going to have to pay for contaminating the water, the air, the soil, giving people cancer, autoimmune illnesses, reproductive problems, for 40 years. $12 million. This company is being made to pay $12 million for contaminating the Cape Fear River. And by the way, if you live in Fayetteville, and there's other counties that are affected. So I hope you're paying attention if you live in North Carolina. Here's the story. Go to statuscoup.com if you want to read along with me. As the corporate media continues to fixate on everything, President Donald Trump, Russia, porn stars, and White House theatrics between Chuck, Nancy, and the Donald, the urgent water crisis and corruption at the center of it hides in virtual silence. And North Carolina is emerging as its latest case, victimized by the criminal collusion, you know you love that word, collusion, between corporations and politicians. In the summer of 2017, Fayetteville and Wilmington, North Carolina were rocked with revelations that Chemours, a chemical company spun off from long-time corporate chemical contaminator DuPont, had been dumping dangerous, cancer-causing chemicals into the Cape Fear River dating back to the early 1980s. The chemicals, called Gen X, are a waste byproduct formed during the manufacturing of Teflon and products like it. It was originally created to replace C8, a cancer-causing PFOA, now being found across the country, including in already water-poisoned Michigan. Proof of PFOA's hazards could be found in the Ohio River Valley, where DuPont's reckless dumping caused mass illness, death, and cancer in the Ohio River Valley, leaving the company on the hook for $670 million. That was a settlement last year that DuPont had to pay to the Ohio there were dozens of class action lawsuits. That was the ultimate settlement they had to pay. Pennies on the dollar for a company like DuPont. Gen X has been found to have similar traits to C8, potentially causing cancers, reproductive, and autoimmune issues. At its Fayetteville, North Carolina factory, Chemours had dumped an estimated 200,000 pounds of Gen X into the Cape Fear River since 1980, flowing down to Wilmington and affecting Brunswick, Pender, New Hanover, and smaller counties in the state. The water contamination only scratches the contamination surface. It's not fully known how bad the damage has been to the air, wildlife, and ground soil. And before I read on, that's a really important point because, you know, when testing, you can measure water contamination. As I'm about to show you in the reporting, it's the chemical companies themselves who are testing the water. And gee, gosh, golly, Jim, they find low levels of contamination. When other people go in and test that aren't the chemical companies that are liable, they find higher levels. But it's a lot harder to quantify and find out what is the damage that is done to the air. What is the damage that is done to the ground soil? What is the damage that's been done to wildlife? I mean, the list goes on and on. So here we go. 40 years of drinking water and environmental contamination DuPont Chemours knew about. Surely executives, company chemists, and politicians who allowed it are going to jail, right? In the latest episode of the United Corporations of America, Chemours has entered a consent order with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and local environmental group Cape Fear River Watch. They've been slapped with a $12 million fine. Or as residents put it to Status Quo, pennies on the dollar. $12 million is nothing to them. Samantha Worrell, a Wilmington resident with 2 children, I spoke with earlier today. They could afford millions for stock buybacks. They could afford millions for their CEO and other executives. They are a billion-dollar company, and they should pay far more than that. Residents and local activists gathered Tuesday evening, meaning last night, at a local meeting with state officials to voice their displeasure with Chemours' slap on the pinky finger. Quote, they were never going to have to admit any wrongdoing. Kathleen Gallagher, who attended the meeting last night, told me about Chemours not having to admit wrongdoing as part of the consent order agreement. So not only do they only have to pay $12 million, they don't even have to admit that they did anything wrong. Only in the United Corporations of America. She went on to say, $12 million is absolutely nothing compared to what they have done down here. Not that it could ever put it back to the way it was with all these chemicals. Gallagher, who is part of an 11,000 member Facebook group, I linked to the group if you want to check it out, dedicated to stopping Gen X contamination and holding Chemours accountable, was incredulous that the highly unpopular consent order was released, get this, it was released at 5 p.m. on Wednesday night, right before Thanksgiving, i.e., a corrupt, foul holiday news dump usually reserved for big, evil corporations like Facebook, who just did that right before turkey stuffing and bad dinner table conversation this year. So let's drill that in. Let's drill that in for you, okay? So you have a DuPont, basically, this is DuPont. It became Chemours. The bottom line is they have been dumping in this water body for 40 years. They are getting off the hook at $12 million. And the state, because they know it's wrong, they know it's corrupt, literally on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, when not a soul, there's very few people paying attention, Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. This is why, news organizations or government officials or corporations that have bad news that they don't really want to publicize, but they have to admit to it, so they publicize it on Thanksgiving or the night before Thanksgiving or the night before Christmas. You get the drill. It's basically to sweep it under the rug. They swept this under the rug. And basically, they get a $12 million fine. They have to provide water for life to some of the wells they contaminated. And that's about it. This is nothing to DuPont. This is nothing to Chemours. Nothing. And it basically tells every other, not only chemical company that manufactures products that release these chemicals into your water. This might be about North Carolina, but this is happening all over the country, folks, where you live. It also tells fossil fuel companies, chemical companies, mining companies, hey, don't worry about it. We'll have to fine you so it looks like we actually have a government that represents the people. But you're not going to go to jail or anything for contaminating the water. You're not going to go to jail for contaminating the air. You're not going to go to jail if you kill some animals. You're not even going to go to jail if people die. I mean, when does it end? When does it end?